Googling stuff is not harder today than it used to be. People just stopped learning how to Google. They stopped being taught by librarians how to actually use Google beyond typing a question into Google, which was never the right way to go in the first place. They stopped teaching these kinds of things in school because they started assuming everyone was just born with this knowledge because it wasn't new anymore. It's awful. It's really bad. There's much more trash online. Yes, and part of learning how to Google is learning how to sort through that trash and evaluate sources. And again, that's not taught, but that is a crucial part of learning how to Google or research or synthesize information. And it's not taught anymore. Old school advice. Now everyone thinks Wikipedia is bad because intellectualism's bad and encyclopedias are bad and information is bad. So now we just trust information from random 14-year-olds on TikTok who don't know anything and say because they have a bunch of followers, they know better than people who have actual authority on it. Researching is not any more difficult than it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago. It's only more difficult because people never actually learn the skills to do the research and search through it. It makes me so mad. And we've developed this whole anti-intellectualism phase where actual authoritative sources don't matter anymore. And if you try to present yourself as an expert because you are an expert, suddenly you're bad. And it's just, and there's I don't know how you fix that without undoing all of social media do. Actually, that's not true. I do. The way to fix that is to stop making social media sites trying to be everyone's homepage. They're not AOL. It's not your full internet. Facebook used to be a personal, basically, Facebook address book where you connected with friends, shared status updates, and that was it. Not a forum, a news site, a video platform. When sites moved more and more to trying to do everything as many functions and as many features as possible to keep you on the website longer, they lost the magic that made them fun in the first place with, what they were great at to begin with, but they also really started causing more problems because and this is part of what I'm talking about with kids not being taught the proper way to use the internet and computers these days, because when you use a singular tool for the purpose of that tool, you're able to disconnect yourself from all of the other bad things on that place because that's not where the website is for. We think about it when we think about the boomer grandparents that hear conspiracy theories on Facebook and things like that. And I'm saying kids these days aren't taught this, but boomers are still they're still around when they came before technology was really being taught at all. So keep that in mind. But you hear that trope, and that comes from the fact that they now so many people rely on Facebook to be basically their entire internet. When in reality, Facebook is just a place to connect with your friends, not to get reliable news sources, not to find out about vaccines or medicine or anything like that. It is a site to connect with friends and talk about your life and send messages. And when you can be okay, this is the point of the tool, and someone's like, I heard this crazy thing about how the sky's falling on Facebook. You can be like, well, Facebook isn't really the place to find that out. I'm going to go evaluate it on a news source or a scientific source with authority, and you learn how to evaluate those sources and determine that. Then you use that website and you go figure it out. And yes, there's some nuance when it comes to biases, which are overblown, and fact checking and all of that, but the more you diversify the tools that you use for different purposes, the more you learn about it. And it's the same thing, to demonstrate this on a more basic level. We have moved where everyone got excited that your cell phone, your smartphone, could be every possible tool for you. It can be a phone. It can be your internet browser. It can be a game machine. It can be a camera. And when you rely on this one thing to do all of those things, you get a convenience factor, especially if you're not someone who is skilled with all of those things. You get a convenience factor. And for a lot of people, it's more than good enough. It's all you need to do. But if you actually want to go learn photography and pick up a camera and go do photography, you probably don't understand many of the aspects of photography in terms of not only just the technical, ISO and aperture and that relationship, but that is super crucial important, but also the mechanics of juggling camera gear and choosing the right camera gear and blah, 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 and all of that, because it's all done for you. And even when you go into manual settings, it is still doing computational AI-based changing to your image that you have no control over. And you lose the fundamentals when you go for the convenience. And then you lose appreciation for it, because then you have people being like, well, how do I get a filter for a fisheye effect? Or how do I blur my background? It's that comes from apertures and lens widths and all of these things. And and again, This is a simplified example that doesn't matter if you're not hardcore into photography, and for someone just posting to their Instagram or whatever, it's not a huge deal. But you have people who then want to go be cinematographers when all they know how to do is put on filters on an iPhone, and that becomes a big problem. The more diversification of a platform, the less control a platform has. Example, Facebook. Yes, when you use Facebook as a social media site, not an email site, you use an email site for email, you use news sites for news, you're immediately thinking more critically and better off than most of the population right now. Remember when there were thousands of blogs and websites about different topics? Yeah, and then they all became Facebook pages or groups. I mean, there are still some. It's still a thing. People just use them way less. Okay, here's another example. If you're having trouble with with a specific product you bought, let me stick it there. If you're having trouble with a specific product you bought, how do you get help with that? Your choices are A, your cousin or grandchild that's great with computers. B, a YouTube comment section of a review from 5 years ago. C, spamming every possible platform to contact the creator of that video from 5 years ago. Or D, the support services, either on a website, phone, forum, in store, for that company, the store you bought it from, or the manufacturer that made the product. If you answered anything but D as the starting point, unless you're just really good with that family member and you just happen to ask them real quick, if you answered 2 or 3, you don't know what the hell you're doing. First of all, maybe start with Google to get a basic result, but if you need hands-on support, you contact tech support. There's a function for that. The internet itself is not tech support. Some support services aren't too good and usually just end in paying an unnecessary fee. Yes and no.